My name is Ada, and I'm 62 years old, a retired single mom living in Boston. My son Thomas, his wife Melissa, and my two beautiful granddaughters Emma and Lily were supposed to take me out for my birthday dinner. But just hours before Thomas called to cancel because Melissa was sick. When I went to the restaurant to pick up a gift I'd left, I discovered all of them dining without me celebrating my birthday at my expense. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you've ever felt betrayed by family, hit that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss how I turned this heartbreaking moment into a powerful lesson that silenced everyone at that table. Raising Thomas alone wasn't the life I had planned. When my husband Jack died suddenly from a heart attack, Thomas was only 10 years old, and I found myself a widow at 34. Jack had been the love of my life, my high school sweetheart from our small town in Maine. We'd moved to Boston for his job in construction management, and I'd been working part-time as a school secretary while raising Thomas. After Jack's death, our comfortable middle-class life changed dramatically. The life insurance helped initially, but it wasn't enough for long-term security. I took on full-time work at the school and picked up weekend shifts at a local department store. Sleep became a luxury as I juggled bills, housework, and being both mother and father to a grieving boy. "Mom, when is Dad coming back?" Thomas would ask during those first months, his small face pinched with confusion. Each time my heart would break anew as I explained gently that Dad wasn't coming back, but that I would always be there. And I was. I never missed a parent-teacher conference, a baseball game, or a school concert. On particularly difficult days, I'd set my alarm for 4:30 a.m. to bake Thomas's favorite cookies or prepare special lunches, leaving notes that said, "Mom loves you," or "You make me proud." Small gestures to remind him he wasn't alone. As Thomas grew older, I started putting aside a little money each month for his college fund. It wasn't much, $20 here, $50 there. But over the years, combined with scholarships and student loans, it was enough to send him to a respectable state university for a business degree. "I'm going to pay you back someday, Mom," Thomas promised the day I dropped him off at his dormitory, his eyes shining with determination. "I'll make sure you never have to work so hard again." I still remember hugging him tight, my chest swelling with pride. "Just be happy, honey. That's all the payback I need." During those college years, Thomas would call me regularly, sharing stories about his classes and friends. He'd come home for holidays and some weekends bringing his laundry and his appetite for home-cooked meals. We remained close, and I felt confident that the bond we'd forged through hardship would last a lifetime. After graduation, Thomas landed a job at a marketing firm in Boston. He started at entry level, but quickly climbed the corporate ladder. His natural charisma and work ethic, traits he'd inherited from his father, served him well. By 30, he was an executive with a corner office and a salary that made my school secretary wages seem like pocket change. It was around this time that Thomas met Melissa. They crossed paths at a charity gala, the kind of event I would never have been invited to. Thomas had brought me a program as a souvenir, and I remembered thinking how elegant everything looked. Melissa's family name was listed among the major donors. The first time Thomas brought Melissa to meet me was for Sunday lunch at my small 2-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood of Boston. I'd spent the entire morning cleaning, cooking, and trying to make my humble home presentable. I'd even splurged on fresh flowers for the table. Melissa arrived wearing designer clothes and carrying a handbag that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was beautiful with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of polished appearance that comes from a lifetime of privilege. Her smile was pleasant, but didn't reach her eyes as she looked around my apartment. "This is cozy," she said in a tone that made it clear she meant small and unimpressive. Throughout lunch, she asked very little about me, instead dominating the conversation with stories about her family's vacation homes, their connections in Boston society, and her job at her father's investment firm. When I mentioned my work at the school, she nodded distractedly before turning to Thomas and asking if he'd received an invitation to some exclusive event. Your mother is very provincial, I overheard her telling Thomas later as they were leaving. She hadn't realized I was in the hallway returning from the bathroom. Charming in her way, but not exactly the type of person we usually socialize with. Thomas's response had been too quiet for me to hear, but I noticed that his visits became less frequent after that. Our phone conversations shortened. He began to cancel plans at the last minute, always with a reasonable excuse: work emergencies, social obligations with Melissa's family, or simply being too tired. When Thomas announced their engagement 6 months later, I tried to be genuinely happy for him. The wedding was an elaborate affair at one of Boston's oldest and most prestigious hotels. Melissa's parents, Gerald and Patricia Wellington, spared no expense making it clear to everyone that this was their event, their show of status. I felt out of place in my carefully chosen dress from a department store sale rack. Melissa had insisted on approving my outfit beforehand, rejecting my first 2 choices as not suitable for the venue. At the reception, I was seated at a table far from the wedding party, with distant relatives who barely knew Thomas. "Don't take it personally," an elderly aunt of Melissa's told me kindly. "The Wellingtons have a certain way of doing things. It's not about you." But it felt very much about me, especially when I overheard Patricia Wellington telling another guest, "We're just so pleased Thomas has overcome his humble beginnings." After the wedding, my relationship with Thomas deteriorated further. He and Melissa bought a sprawling house in an exclusive suburb complete with a pool, home theater, and guest house. I was invited to see it exactly once during a hurried afternoon visit where Melissa made it clear that my shoes might damage their imported hardwood floors. When Emma was born 2 years later, I was overjoyed at the prospect of being a grandmother. I'd imagined rocking chairs and bedtime stories, baking cookies, and creating the same kind of loving memories I had shared with my own grandmother. But Melissa had different ideas. "We prefer to limit visitors during the first few months," she informed me coolly when I called to arrange a visit. "The baby's immune system is still developing, and we're being cautious about exposures." Somehow, this caution didn't extend to Melissa's parents, who posted frequent pictures of themselves holding newborn Emma on social media. It was 3 months before I was permitted to meet my granddaughter, and even then, the visit was brief and supervised, as if I couldn't be trusted with an infant, despite having raised my own child. The pattern continued with Lily's birth 2 years later. I was allowed into their lives on a limited, controlled basis. Birthdays, holidays, milestones. All were celebrated primarily with the Wellingtons, with me receiving last-minute invitations if I received them at all. Yet despite all this, Emma and Lily adored me when we did get time together. Children have an intuitive sense for genuine love, and I loved those girls with every fiber of my being. I would bring small, thoughtful gifts, hand-knitted sweaters, books I thought they'd enjoy, simple toys that encouraged imagination. Melissa usually relegated these gifts to the playroom or guest house away from the designer aesthetic of the main living spaces. "Grandma Ada tells the best stories," Emma once declared during one of my visits, crawling onto my lap with her favorite book. The look of annoyance that flashed across Melissa's face was unmistakable. "Emma, remember what we talked about personal space? Not everyone wants a child climbing all over them," Melissa chided, though I had made no complaint. "I don't mind at all," I assured her, wrapping my arms around Emma. "This is what grandmas are for." "Well, my mother prefers that the girls maintain proper behavior," Melissa replied. "Different strokes, I suppose." These subtle digs became a constant feature of our interactions. Melissa never missed an opportunity to highlight the differences between my middle-class ways and her upper-class expectations. Thomas, to my growing disappointment, rarely intervened. The ambitious, loving boy who had promised to take care of me had been replaced by a man who seemed embarrassed by his own mother. Still, I cherished the moments I did get with my family. The simple birthday cards Thomas would send, signed by him, and the girls, never Melissa. The rare phone calls from my granddaughters, usually made when Melissa was out. The occasional dinner, always at a restaurant of their choosing, where I would listen to sanitized versions of their lives while trying not to notice how Thomas winced when I used the wrong fork or mispronounced a menu item. It wasn't the family relationship I had dreamed of, but I told myself it was better than nothing. I convinced myself that Thomas still cared, that he was just caught between two worlds, the humble, loving one of his childhood and the privileged, status-conscious one he now inhabited. I held on to hope that someday he would remember what truly mattered. Little did I know that my 62nd birthday would force that reckoning sooner than anyone expected. My birthday has never been a grand affair. After Jack died, I downplayed it for years, not wanting Thomas to feel pressured to make a fuss when we were struggling financially. As an adult, Thomas usually remembered with a card, sometimes flowers, or a simple gift certificate. We might have lunch or an early dinner, nothing extravagant. This year felt different from the start. 3 weeks before my birthday, I received an actual phone call from Thomas, not just a text or email. "Mom, I want to take you out for your birthday this year," he said, his voice unusually enthusiastic. "The whole family. Me, Melissa, Emma, and Lily. We want to celebrate properly." "That sounds lovely," I replied, trying to contain my surprise and delight. "What were you thinking?" "There's this fantastic French restaurant downtown, Française Elegante. Very exclusive, amazing food. I've made reservations for 7 o'clock on your birthday. We'll pick you up at 6:30. I was momentarily speechless. Française Elegante was one of those establishments I passed occasionally and wondered about, the kind with no prices on the menu displayed outside, where elegantly dressed people emerged from luxury cars. Not somewhere I'd ever imagined dining. "Thomas, that sounds very expensive," I said carefully. "We could go somewhere more casual. You know I'm happy with just spending time together." "Mom, it's your 62nd birthday. Let me do this for you," he insisted. "I want to give you a special evening." His words warmed my heart in a way I hadn't felt in years. Perhaps things were changing. Perhaps Melissa was softening her stance, or Thomas was finally asserting the importance of his relationship with me. Whatever the reason, I allowed myself to feel hopeful. In the weeks leading up to my birthday, I found myself uncharacteristically excited. I withdrew $200 from my modest savings account and purchased a new dress, navy blue with delicate beading around the neckline, the most elegant thing I'd owned in decades. I even splurged on having my hair professionally colored to cover the gray that had been increasingly prominent. "Special occasion?" my hairdresser Doris asked as she applied the color. "My son is taking me to Française Elegante for my birthday," I replied, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "Fancy, that's wonderful, Ada. You deserve to be spoiled a little." I also spent considerable time selecting gifts for my granddaughters, books I thought they'd enjoy, along with small silver lockets containing tiny photos of us together from one of our rare outings. For Melissa, I chose a scented candle from a boutique shop, one that wouldn't offend her refined tastes. But my most significant effort went into Thomas's gift. Years ago, after Jack died, I had put away his personal effects, too painful to look at, but too precious to discard. Among them was Jack's watch. Nothing extravagantly valuable, but a good quality timepiece that had been a gift from his parents when he graduated college. It had stopped working shortly before his death, and he had meant to have it repaired. I took the watch to a reputable jeweler, spending more than I should have to have it fully restored. The scratched crystal replaced the worn leather band, updated with a new one. It wasn't a Rolex or a Patek Philippe like the watches Thomas now wore, but it was his father's, a tangible connection to the man who had missed seeing the successful adult his son had become. The jeweler placed it in a handsome wooden box, and I wrote a heartfelt note to accompany it. I imagined Thomas's face when he opened it, the significance dawning on him. Perhaps it would remind him of where he came from, of the values his father had embodied, hard work, integrity, and the importance of family over status. On the morning of my birthday, I woke early feeling a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. 62 years, more than half of those without Jack, all of them devoted to Thomas. I allowed myself a moment of pride for having raised such a successful son on my own, for having weathered the storms of life with dignity and perseverance. I spent the day preparing, taking extra time with my appearance. I wanted to look my best, not to impress Melissa, or to fit into their world, but to show Thomas that his mother could rise to the occasion, that I wasn't an embarrassment to be managed, but a person worthy of celebration. The call came at 4:30, just as I was applying the finishing touches to my makeup. "Mom!" Thomas's voice had that particular tone I'd come to recognize over the years, the prelude to a cancellation. "Yes, Thomas." I tried to keep the apprehension from my voice. "I'm really sorry, but we have to cancel dinner tonight. Melissa's come down with something. Might be that stomach bug that's going around. She's been in the bathroom all afternoon." The familiar weight of disappointment settled in my chest. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do? Bring over some soup or medicine?" No, that's not necessary. Her mother's already dropped some things off. We just need to reschedule. Maybe next weekend if she's feeling better." "Of course," I said automatically. "I hope she feels better soon." "Thanks for understanding, Mom. I'll call you tomorrow or the day after to reschedule." "Thomas," I said quickly before he could hang up. "Yes." "It's my birthday today." A pause. "I know, Mom. That's why I'm extra disappointed we have to cancel. I'll make it up to you, I promise." He ended the call without saying happy birthday. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my new dress, looking at my reflection in the small vanity mirror. My carefully applied makeup seemed to highlight rather than hide the lines of age and disappointment etched into my face. For a moment, I considered removing it all, changing into pajamas, and spending the evening with a TV dinner and whatever movie I could find on cable. But then I remembered the gifts. In my excitement, I had arranged with the restaurant to have them delivered earlier in the day, planning to have them presented at the end of our meal. The wrapped packages were sitting at Française Elegante, waiting for a celebration that wouldn't happen. "I should at least go pick those up," I murmured to myself. Decision made, I grabbed my purse and car keys. The drive to downtown Boston in early evening traffic took nearly 40 minutes, during which I fluctuated between sadness and a determined effort to maintain perspective. People got sick. Plans changed. It wasn't the end of the world, and we would indeed reschedule. As I navigated the unfamiliar streets near the restaurant searching for parking, I reminded myself that Thomas had at least tried to plan something special. That counted for something, didn't it? And yet a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that this was simply the latest in a long pattern of disappointments and exclusions. I finally found a parking space 2 blocks from Française Elegante. The evening air was crisp with early autumn, and I pulled my light jacket closer around me as I walked, conscious of being overdressed for a simple errand, but glad I had made the effort anyway. It preserved a small scrap of the dignity I had been looking forward to. The restaurant's exterior was even more impressive up close. A restored 19th century building with elegant lighting and a discreet brass plaque rather than a garish sign. Through the large windows, I could see tables with white linens, sparkling glassware, and well-dressed patrons engaged in conversation. A world apart from my usual haunts. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The interior of Française Elegante was even more intimidating than I had imagined. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, casting a warm glow over walls adorned with tasteful artwork. The gentle notes of a piano drifted through the space, and the air was perfumed with delicious aromas that made my stomach remind me I hadn't eaten since lunch. A young woman with perfect posture stood behind a sleek reservation desk, her expression politely neutral as I approached. Her name tag identified her as Celeste. "Good evening, madam. Do you have a reservation with us tonight?" she asked, her voice carrying just a hint of a French accent. "No, actually," I replied, suddenly feeling foolish in my department store finery. My son had made a reservation for this evening, Thomas Jackson, but the plans were canceled. I just came to pick up some packages I had delivered here earlier. Celeste's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together in confusion as she consulted the screen before her. I see a reservation for Thomas Jackson at 7 o'clock, but it hasn't been canceled. In fact, she glanced at an elegant watch on her slim wrist. The party has already been seated about 20 minutes ago. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. There must be some mistake. My son called a few hours ago to cancel because his wife is ill. I assure you, Madam Mr. Jackson and his party arrived and are currently dining in our main room. A party of 6, I believe. 6. Thomas, some sick Melissa, Emma Lily, and who else? The math didn't add up, and a cold feeling began to spread through my chest. There must be another Thomas Jackson, I said weakly. Celeste gave me a patient smile. That would be quite a coincidence. Shall I check on your packages? What name would they be under? Ada Jackson, I replied automatically, my mind still struggling to process the information. Celeste made a call to someone, spoke quietly for a moment, then turned back to me with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry, Mrs. Jackson, but we don't seem to have any packages under your name. Are you certain they were delivered here? I nodded, now thoroughly confused. Yes, I spoke with the manager yesterday to confirm. 3 gift-wrapped packages and a small wooden box. For my birthday dinner. One moment, please. Celeste made another call, this time speaking at greater length with someone. As she did, my confusion slowly transformed into a suspicion so painful I almost couldn't bear to acknowledge it. When Celeste hung up, her professional demeanor had softened slightly. Mrs. Jackson, our event coordinator, has no record of your packages. However, if you'd like to verify whether the Thomas Jackson dining with us is indeed your son, I can have someone show you to the main dining room discreetly. I hesitated only briefly before nodding. Yes, please, I'd like to check. A young man in a crisp uniform appeared at Celeste's signal. Jean will escort you, Mrs. Jackson. Jean led me through a short hallway and into the main dining room, a space even more opulent than the entrance. Tables were spaced generously apart, providing privacy for diners engaged in quiet conversation. The lighting was subdued but sufficient, creating an atmosphere of intimate exclusivity. Mr. Jackson's table is near the back by the windows overlooking the garden, Jean informed me quietly, gesturing toward a far corner of the room. I followed his direction, my legs moving of their own accord, while my mind raced with possibilities, each more painful than the last. As we approached, the table came into full view, and the sight before me stopped me in my tracks. There, gathered around a table laden with fine food and wine, sat my son Thomas, his wife Melissa, looking remarkably healthy, my granddaughters Emma and Lily, dressed in matching dresses, and an older couple I recognized as Gerald and Patricia Wellington, Melissa's parents. They were laughing, raising champagne glasses in what appeared to be a toast. A small wrapped package sat at what would have been my place, alongside a folded card that even from a distance I could see had "Happy Birthday" written on it. My birthday dinner hadn't been canceled. I had been canceled. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't even form a coherent thought beyond the crushing realization that my own son had deliberately excluded me from my birthday celebration. A celebration that was clearly proceeding without me. It was Emma who spotted me first. Her face lit up with genuine delight as she waved enthusiastically. "Grandma Ada, Grandma's here," she called out, her high, clear voice carrying across the restaurant. 5 heads turned in my direction, producing 5 very different expressions. Emma and Lily with delight, Melissa with shock, Thomas with something between horror and shame, and the elder Wellingtons with poorly concealed annoyance. As I stood frozen, Jean tactfully withdrew, leaving me alone to face the tableau of my family's betrayal. Thomas recovered first, rising half out of his chair. "Mom, what are you doing here?" His voice carried a note of panic. Before I could respond, Emma had slipped from her chair and was running toward me, Lily following close behind. "Grandma, We're having a party. Daddy said you were coming, but then Mommy said you couldn't make it, but you're here now. Emma wrapped her arms around my waist while Lily tugged at my hand. Girls, come back to the table right now. Melissa's voice cut through the moment sharp with authority. You know we don't run in restaurants. Emma looked up at me with innocent confusion. Aren't you staying for your birthday, Grandma? We have cake and everything. The restaurant had gone oddly quiet, other diners sensing the unfolding drama. Thomas was now fully standing, his face ashen. Melissa remained seated but was gripping her napkin so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Ada, Gerald Wellington spoke with the confidence of a man accustomed to controlling situations. What an unexpected surprise. There seems to be some confusion about tonight's arrangements. Melissa jumped in quickly. This isn't what you think, Ada. We had already planned this dinner with my parents weeks ago. When I started feeling better this afternoon, we decided to keep the reservation since my parents had traveled across town. It has nothing to do with your birthday. The lie was so blatant, so absurd in the face of the birthday card and gift sitting on the table that for a moment I could only stare in disbelief. Then why does Grandma have a birthday card? Lily asked innocently, pointing to the table. And Daddy said we were celebrating her special day. That's why we got dressed up. Out of the mouths of babes indeed. The silence that followed Lily's innocent question hung heavy in the air. Every eye in the restaurant seemed to be on us. The overdressed older woman, the two excited little girls, and the visibly uncomfortable adults at the table. A waiter hovered uncertainly nearby, clearly unsure whether to intervene or pretend nothing unusual was happening. Thomas finally broke the silence, his voice strained. Mom, I can explain. Melissa was feeling sick earlier, but she recovered quickly, and we decided to keep the reservation since her parents were already planning to join us. We were going to surprise you next weekend with a different celebration, something more suitable. More suitable? I repeated the words, tasting bitter. What would be more suitable than celebrating with my family on my actual birthday? Melissa let out an exasperated sigh. Ada, please don't make a scene. The girls are excited, and we're trying to have a nice family dinner. A family dinner, I echoed. Without the birthday person. Grandma, sit next to me. Lily tugged at my hand again, oblivious to the tension. I saved you a spot. Looking down at her hopeful face, I made a split-second decision that would change everything. Instead of turning and walking away with what remained of my dignity, instead of creating the scene Melissa clearly expected, I nodded at my youngest granddaughter. I'd love to sit next to you, Lily. Thank you for saving me a spot. Thomas and Melissa exchanged panicked glances as I approached the table. Patricia Wellington's mouth formed a tight, disapproving line, while Gerald seemed almost amused by the unexpected turn of events. Jean, I called to the young man who had escorted me and was now watching from a discreet distance. Would you mind bringing another chair? It seems my family forgot I was coming after all. The waiter rushed to comply, producing an extra chair and place setting with impressive efficiency. I settled between my granddaughters, smoothing my new dress and placing my napkin in my lap, as if this were exactly how I'd planned to spend my evening. So, I said pleasantly, looking around the table. It seems Melissa made a remarkable recovery. I'm so glad to see you feeling better. Melissa's cheeks flushed pink. It was probably just something I ate. It passed quickly. How fortunate, I replied, and how thoughtful of you to immediately call and let me know the dinner was back on. Thomas cleared his throat. Mom, like I said, we were planning to do something special with just you next weekend. Tonight was already going to include Melissa's parents, and we thought... You thought what, Thomas? I asked, my voice calm but firm. That I wouldn't fit in here. That I would embarrass you in front of the Wellingtons. That I wouldn't know which fork to use. That's not fair, he protested weakly. Isn't it? I reached over and picked up the birthday card with my name clearly written on it. This suggests otherwise. Emma, sensing the growing tension, tried to help in her innocent way. We got you a present too. Grandma, can she open it now? Daddy? Thomas looked trapped. Maybe we should wait until after dinner, sweetheart. But it's her birthday, Emma insisted with a child's logic. You open presents on your birthday. That's the rule. Patricia Wellington intervened, her voice carrying that particular tone of upper-class condescension I had come to know well. Emma dear, adults do things differently. Sometimes we adjust our plans for convenience. Is that what happened here? I asked, looking directly at Patricia. A convenient adjustment that just happened to exclude me from my own birthday dinner. Gerald Wellington chuckled, surprising everyone at the table. Well, the cat's out of the bag now, isn't it? No use pretending. Yes, Ada, if you want the truth, Melissa felt it would be more appropriate to celebrate your birthday in a more casual setting, somewhere you'd be more comfortable. Dad, Melissa hissed, but Gerald waved her off. Oh, come now. We're all adults here. Ada deserves the courtesy of honesty at least. He turned back to me. My daughter thought, and Thomas agreed, that you might feel out of place in an establishment like this. They plan to take you to that little diner you like next weekend. More your speed, as it were. I absorbed this brutal honesty, strangely grateful for it after years of polite exclusion and subtle put-downs. At least now the truth was on the table, as clearly displayed as the fine china and crystal glasses. I see, I said quietly. And the decision to tell me Melissa was sick, rather than simply being honest, was that also for my comfort? Thomas at least had the grace to look ashamed. We didn't want to hurt your feelings. And yet, I observed, here we are. A waiter approached, breaking the tense moment. Would Madame like to see a menu, or perhaps join the table for the main course? They have just been served. I looked at the plates being set before the others. Artistic arrangements of food that looked more like sculpture than sustenance. Under different circumstances, I might have been intimidated by such culinary sophistication. But something had shifted inside me, a lifetime of accommodation, giving way to a quiet but firm resolve. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse, I'd like to see the wine list first. The waiter produced an extensive leather-bound book, which I opened and perused calmly, aware of the bewildered expressions around the table. I selected a moderately expensive bottle of red wine, then handed him my credit card. We'll take this one, and I'd like to pay for the entire meal this evening. Mom, that's not necessary, Thomas protested. I've got this. No, Thomas, I said firmly. It's my birthday dinner. I insist. I turned to the waiter. Please add a generous tip as well. The service has been excellent under rather unusual circumstances. As the waiter departed with my credit card, I finally allowed myself to look directly at my son. Now shall we enjoy this lovely meal together? After all, it's not every day a woman turns 62. The silence that followed was deafening. The main course progressed in uncomfortable silence, broken only by the girls' occasional chatter and my deliberate questions about their school and activities. Thomas ate mechanically, barely tasting the expensive food. Melissa pushed hers around her plate, her appetite apparently diminished by my presence. The elder Wellingtons exchanged meaningful glances, clearly regretting their decision to participate in this charade. When the plates were cleared, Emma could contain herself no longer. Can Grandma open her present now, please? Thomas nodded weakly, and Emma proudly pushed the small gift-wrapped box toward me. I picked it out myself. Well, Mommy helped a little. I carefully unwrapped the package to find a delicate teacup and saucer hand-painted with violets. It's beautiful, Emma. Thank you. It's because you always make tea when we visit, she explained earnestly. Now you have a fancy cup like the ones in Mommy's cabinet that we're not allowed to touch. I smiled genuinely at my granddaughter. That was very thoughtful. I'll think of you every time I use it. Lily, not to be outdone, pointed to the card. I drew the picture inside. It's you and me and Emma at the park. I opened the card to find a child's drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands beside what appeared to be a swing set. "It's perfect, Lily. Thank you for remembering my birthday." "We always remember," Emma said confidently. "Daddy puts it on the big calendar in the kitchen, but Mommy said we couldn't go to your house this year because we were doing something special instead." I glanced at Melissa, whose expression had hardened. "Emma, that's enough. Why don't you tell Grandma about your ballet recital next month?" But Emma wasn't so easily redirected. "Mommy, can Grandma come to the recital? Last time you said she was too busy." The simple question hung in the air like an accusation. I had never been too busy for any event involving my granddaughters. In fact, I had never even been told about a ballet recital. "Of course, Grandma can come." Thomas jumped in quickly. "We'll make sure she gets an invitation." "Like the invitation to Lily's birthday party?" I asked quietly. The one I heard about only after it happened, when Emma called to tell me about the pony rides. Thomas had the grace to look embarrassed. "That was an oversight, Mom. We've been so busy and things just slip through the cracks." "A lot seems to slip through the cracks when it involves me," I observed. "Emma's school play your company's family picnic the weekend at the Wellington's Lake House last summer." "Those were private family events," Melissa interjected. "And I'm not family." I asked the question simple but devastating. Emma looked confused. "Of course you're family, Grandma. You're Daddy's mommy." "That's right, sweetheart," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "I am Daddy's mommy. I've been his family since the day he was born." I turned to Thomas, who couldn't meet my eyes. "Do you remember what you said to me the day I dropped you off at college? You promised that someday you'd pay me back for all the sacrifices I made raising you alone. You said you'd make sure I never had to work so hard again." "Mom, please," Thomas muttered, clearly uncomfortable with this walk down memory lane in front of his in-laws. "It's not about money, Thomas. It never was. It was about being there for each other, about respect and inclusion and valuing family above all else. Those were the values your father and I tried to instill in you." At the mention of Jack, Thomas flinched visibly. Gerald Wellington leaned forward, his curiosity apparently overcoming his distaste for family drama. "Your late husband. He was a construction worker, wasn't he?" "A construction manager?" I corrected firmly. "He worked his way up from carrying lumber to overseeing major projects. He was respected by everyone who knew him for his integrity and work ethic." "Dad was really strong," Emma chimed in unexpectedly. "Grandma showed me pictures. He could carry Daddy on his shoulders." I smiled at her touch that she remembered our conversations about the grandfather she never met. "That's right, Emma. Your Grandpa Jack was very strong in all the ways that matter." Patricia Wellington sniffed delicately. "Well, I'm sure he was a good provider in his way. It's a shame he didn't leave you better provided for." The condescension in her tone made my spine stiffen. Jack left me the most important things: wonderful memories, a strong son, and values that can't be measured in dollar signs. "Those values don't pay the bills, though, do they?" Patricia remarked. "Thomas tells us you're still working at that school, even though you're well past retirement age." "I work because I choose to," I replied. "I find purpose in contributing to children's education. Not everyone measures success by the size of their bank account or the prestige of their address." Gerald Wellington laughed, a sharp bark of sound that drew glances from nearby tables. "Well, you certainly are refreshingly direct, Ada. I can see where Thomas gets his determination. Though I must say he's adapted quite well to a different set of circumstances." "Has he?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, taking in the expensive haircut, the designer watch, the way he held himself now, always slightly on edge, as if afraid of making a misstep. "I wonder if he's happier for it." Melissa bristled. "Thomas has a successful career, a beautiful home, 2 wonderful children, and connections to Boston's best families. Of course he's happy." "Are you, Thomas?" I asked directly. Are you happy with who you've become? For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, a glimpse of the thoughtful, caring boy I had raised. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the polished veneer he now wore like armor. Mom, this isn't the time or place for this conversation. When is the time, Thomas? When you're not too busy, when Melissa approves, when it's convenient for the Wellington schedule. The waiter approached with the dessert cart, hesitated upon sensing the tension, then soldiered on professionally. We have a special birthday cake prepared for Mrs. Jackson as requested. A small but elegant cake was placed in front of me, adorned with a single candle. Happy birthday, Ada, was written in delicate chocolate script across the top. Make a wish, Grandma, Lily urged, bouncing in her seat with excitement. Looking at the tiny flame, I felt a strange calm settle over me. In that moment, my wish crystallized with perfect clarity, not for reconciliation or inclusion, but for the courage to finally speak my truth and stand in my own worth. I blew out the candle to enthusiastic clapping from my granddaughters. What did you wish for? Emma asked eagerly. If she tells, it won't come true, Lily informed her sister seriously. I smiled at them both. Some wishes work differently. This one is already coming true just by being brave enough to wish it. Reaching into my purse, I took out my credit card receipt, confirming that I had indeed paid for the entire expensive meal. I placed it on the table where everyone could see it. Consider this my birthday gift to all of you, I said quietly. A lesson about respect, honesty, and the true meaning of family. I hope it was worth the price. The dessert plates were cleared in awkward silence. Thomas kept glancing at his watch, clearly eager for this uncomfortable evening to end. The Wellington parents maintained a frigid dignity, speaking only to correct their granddaughter's posture or remind them to use their napkins properly. Melissa had given up any pretense of eating, instead nursing a glass of wine while avoiding eye contact with me. Only Emma and Lily seemed oblivious to the tension, chattering happily about school and friends, occasionally including me in their conversations while the adults remained silent. Grandma, did you know I got moved up to the advanced reading group? Emma said proudly. Mrs. Bennett says I read at a 5th grade level already. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I replied genuinely. You always did love our story times. Remember when you used to come over more and read to us before bed? Lily added. I miss that. Why don't you come over anymore? Thomas cleared his throat. Lily, Grandma is very busy with her work and her own friends. Actually, I corrected gently, I've never been too busy for you girls. I've always made time when I was invited. But you hardly ever come over, Emma said, confusion creasing her small forehead. That's because I'm not invited very often, sweetheart. Why not? Emma looked at her parents accusingly. Why don't we invite Grandma? Melissa's patience finally snapped. Emma, that's enough. Adult relationships are complicated, and this isn't the time to discuss it. It seems to me, I said carefully, that this is exactly the time to discuss it. After all, we're all here celebrating my birthday, even if it was meant to be without me. Gerald Wellington cleared his throat. Perhaps we should settle the bill and continue this family discussion elsewhere. The bill is already settled, I reminded him. And I'm not sure there will be another opportunity for this particular conversation. I turned to Thomas, who was studiously examining the tablecloth. Thomas, I'd like to know why you lied to me today. Not Melissa's explanation or your in-laws' opinion. I want to hear from you why you told me this dinner was canceled. He shifted uncomfortably in his expensive chair. Mom, it wasn't entirely a lie. Melissa was feeling unwell earlier. But she recovered miraculously fast, and you didn't think to call me, I pressed. It was complicated, he hedged. We had already told Melissa's parents to come, and then with Melissa feeling better, we thought, you thought it would be easier to exclude me than to include me, I finished for him. The truth, Thomas, you owe me that much. Thomas glanced at Melissa, who was glaring at him with warning in her eyes. For once, he seemed to find some remnant of his former self straightening his shoulders and looking me directly in the eye. "The truth is, Melissa thought you wouldn't be comfortable here. She said it would be awkward for everyone, that you wouldn't know how to act in a place like this, that you might embarrass us in front of her parents." Patricia Wellington made a small sound of disapproval, whether at the revelation or at Thomas for sharing it, I couldn't tell. "And you agreed with that assessment?" I asked quietly. Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't disagree strongly enough. I told myself it would be easier to take you somewhere less formal next weekend, somewhere you'd enjoy more. So you decided what I would enjoy without asking me. You made assumptions about my comfort level without giving me the chance to decide for myself. And most importantly, you chose to lie rather than have an honest conversation with me. "It wasn't just about tonight," Melissa interjected, apparently deciding that since the truth was emerging anyway, she might as well defend herself. "It's about every time we include you in our social events. You don't fit in with our circle, Ada. You don't understand the nuances, the expectations. It's uncomfortable for everyone." "For everyone or for you?" I asked. "For the children, too," she insisted. "They need to learn proper social behavior to understand the world they're growing up in. Your influence confuses them." "My influence," I repeated. "You mean my love for them, my interest in their thoughts and feelings, my willingness to let them be children rather than miniature adults performing for your social circle?" Emma, surprisingly perceptive for her age, jumped in. "I like when Grandma comes over. She plays games with us and doesn't care if we get messy." "Exactly my point," Melissa said triumphantly, as if Emma had just proven her case rather than refuted it. Gerald Wellington, who had been watching this exchange with increasing interest, suddenly addressed me directly. "Ada, let's be frank. You come from a different world than the one Thomas and Melissa are building for their family. There's nothing wrong with that, but it does create friction." "What different world would that be, Mr. Wellington?" I asked, my voice steady. "You know perfectly well. A working-class background, limited education, different priorities. Again, nothing wrong with that, but you must see how it might not mesh well with the environment we're cultivating for our grandchildren." "The environment you're cultivating," I repeated slowly. "And what values exactly are you cultivating in this rarefied environment? The value of lying to avoid difficult conversations. The value of excluding family members who don't meet your standards of social acceptability. The value of teaching children that appearances matter more than genuine connections." Patricia Wellington's face flushed with indignation. "How dare you question our values? We have given these children every advantage, every opportunity. Except the opportunity to know and love their grandmother without reservation or judgment," I interrupted. "Except the chance to learn that a person's worth isn't measured by their income or social status, but by their character and the love they give." I turned to Thomas, who seemed to be shrinking further into his chair with each exchange. "Your father would be heartbroken to see what you've become, Thomas. Not because of your success. He would have been immensely proud of that. But because of the way you've allowed that success to change your values, to make you ashamed of where you came from. Of who I am." "I'm not ashamed of you, Mom," Thomas protested weakly. "Aren't you? Then why hide me away? Why exclude me from your real life, only trotting me out for obligatory visits that you schedule around your important social engagements? Why lie to me today instead of standing up to Melissa and her parents?" Before Thomas could respond, I reached into my purse and pulled out the small wooden box containing the watch. I placed it on the table and slid it toward him. "I had planned to give you this tonight. It's your father's watch. I had it restored for you so you would have something of his to keep close. He wore it every day of our marriage until it stopped working shortly before he died." Thomas stared at the box, not opening it, but running his fingers over the polished wood surface. "Mom, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything. Just think about the man who wore that watch. Think about the values he lived by and taught you. Think about whether he would recognize the man you've become. I stood up, smoothing my new dress and gathering my purse. Emma Lily, thank you for making my birthday special. Your card and gift mean the world to me. The girls looked confused by my apparent departure. Aren't you coming home with us, Grandma? Lily asked. Not tonight, sweetheart. Grandma needs to get home. But I hope to see you both very soon. I bent to kiss each of them on the forehead, inhaling the sweet scent of their shampoo, memorizing the feel of their small faces under my lips. Straightening, I addressed the table at large. Thank you for the birthday dinner, even if it wasn't quite as planned. It's certainly one I'll remember. As I turned to leave, Thomas stood abruptly. Mom, wait, don't go like this. I paused, looking back at my son. This man who had once been my whole world, who I had raised alone with love and sacrifice, who now seemed like a stranger in many ways. I'm not going away forever, Thomas, but I am going to make some changes. I've spent too many years accommodating everyone else's comfort at the expense of my own dignity. That ends tonight. What does that mean? He asked, a note of panic in his voice. It means I'm going to start being honest about what I want and need. It means I won't accept being treated as an afterthought or an embarrassment. And it means I expect the same honesty from you, even when it's difficult. I looked at Melissa and her parents. I don't need to fit into your world or meet your standards. I have my own worth, my own dignity, and my own life that I've built through hard work and integrity. Thomas came from that life, and no matter how much you try to erase it, it's part of who he is. And it's part of who your daughters are too, whether you like it or not. With that, I turned and walked through the restaurant with my head held high, aware of the eyes following me, but no longer concerned with anyone's judgment. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Not from my love for Thomas and my granddaughters, but from the need for their approval or inclusion. Outside in the cool evening air, I took a deep breath, surprised to find my eyes dry and my heart oddly light. Something significant had shifted inside me, a recognition that I deserved better than what I had been accepting. And in that recognition was the seed of a new beginning. As I walked to my car, I heard quick footsteps behind me and turned to find Thomas hurrying to catch up the wooden box clutched in his hand. Mom, he called, slightly out of breath. We need to talk. Please. 6 months have passed since that fateful birthday dinner at Française Elegante. 6 months of profound change, difficult conversations, and gradual healing. Looking back now from the sun-drenched balcony of my new apartment in St. Petersburg, Florida, I can see that evening as the breaking point that was necessary for something new and better to emerge. I hadn't planned to move to Florida. The decision came gradually in the weeks following my birthday, as I began the process of reclaiming my life and reassessing what I wanted for my remaining years. After Thomas followed me out of the restaurant that night, we had our first honest conversation in years. Painful, but necessary. I don't even recognize myself anymore, Mom, he had admitted, standing under a streetlight, looking more like the vulnerable boy I'd raised than the polished executive he'd become. Somewhere along the way, I started believing that all this stuff, the status, the connections, the right address, actually mattered more than the things you taught me. Why Thomas? I had asked simply. What were you looking for that you couldn't find in the values your father and I gave you? He'd been silent for a long moment, turning his father's watch over in his hands. I think I wanted to give my girls everything I didn't have growing up, and somewhere along the way, I confused everything with anything that costs money. I wanted them to have opportunities, doors that would open easily for them. And you thought those doors would close if people knew about your middle-class mother, If they found out you grew up in a modest home with second-hand furniture and clothes from department stores rather than boutiques. It sounds terrible when you say it like that, he'd said, wincing. But yes, I guess that's part of it. Melissa's family, they put a lot of emphasis on background, on fitting in with the right people, and I wanted to belong in their world, even if it meant pushing me out of yours. He'd had no answer for that, just a look of shame that told me everything I needed to know. That night marked the beginning of a reckoning, not just for Thomas, but for me as well. I had to acknowledge my own role in allowing the situation to develop, in accepting crumbs of attention and respect when I deserved a full place at the table. I had to recognize that my fear of losing my son and granddaughters completely had led me to tolerate treatment that diminished my dignity. Over the following weeks, Thomas and I continued our conversations, sometimes with the girls present, sometimes alone. Melissa remained resistant, viewing my newfound assertiveness as a threat to her carefully constructed social image. The Wellingtons withdrew almost entirely, making it clear they considered me an unfortunate connection that was best minimized. But something had shifted in Thomas. Perhaps it was holding his father's watch, that tangible connection to a man whose values had once been his North Star. Perhaps it was seeing his daughter's genuine love for me, untainted by social calculations. Whatever the catalyst, he began to stand up to Melissa and her parents in ways he never had before. "My mother will be at Emma's recital," he stated firmly when Melissa suggested that my presence might complicate things with some important attendees. "She's their grandmother, and she deserves to be there." It was at that recital, watching Emma's earnest performance and celebrating with her afterward, that I first mentioned the possibility of moving to Florida. "I've been thinking about retirement," I told Thomas as we sat in an ice cream parlor, the girls happily devouring sundaes. "My friend Doris moved to St. Petersburg last year, and she loves it. The weather is easier on my joints, and the cost of living is lower than Boston." "Florida," Thomas had looked stricken. "But that's so far away. What about the girls? What about us?" "There are phones and airplanes," I reminded him gently. "And maybe some distance would be healthy for everyone. Give us all space to figure out what kind of relationship we truly want to have." 2 months later, I was unpacking boxes in a small but bright one-bedroom apartment in a 55-plus community just 10 minutes from the Gulf beaches. The complex had a pool, a community center, with activities and neighbors who quickly welcomed me into their social circles. For the first time in decades, I felt like I was living for myself, rather than waiting for scraps of time from my son's busy life. Thomas's reaction to my move surprised me. Instead of the relief I had half expected, he seemed genuinely dismayed by the physical distance I had put between us. He called more frequently than he had in years, his conversations more open and honest. He asked questions about my new life, my new friends, showing an interest I hadn't experienced since before he met Melissa. "The girls miss you terribly," he told me during one call. "Emma keeps asking when they can visit." "They're welcome anytime," I assured him. "There's a lovely children's museum near here, and of course the beaches are beautiful." To my surprise, Thomas arranged a visit just 1 month after my move. He brought Emma and Lily for a long weekend, just the 3 of them. Melissa, he explained awkwardly, had other commitments, but I suspected she simply refused to come. I was secretly relieved. Without her presence, the visit was relaxed and joyful in a way our gatherings hadn't been in years. We built sandcastles on the beach, visited the small aquarium, and ate ice cream for dinner one night, just because we could. The girls were delighted by the freedom from their usual strict schedule and rules, and Thomas seemed to rediscover the joy of parenting without the pressure of meeting Melissa's exacting standards. On their last evening, after the girls had fallen asleep in the small guest room, Thomas and I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "I've made so many mistakes, Mom," he said quietly, turning his father's watch on his wrist. He'd worn it every day since my birthday. "I let Melissa and her parents dictate how our family should function. I chose status over sincerity. I lost sight of what really matters." "We all make mistakes, Thomas," I replied. The important thing is recognizing them and trying to do better. Are you happy here? He asked, gesturing to my new surroundings. I considered the question seriously. Yes, I am. I have freedom here and new friends and a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in a long time. I'm not just waiting anymore. Waiting for invitations, waiting for attention, waiting to be included. I'm living. Thomas nodded slowly. I'm glad. You deserve that. But I want you to know that you'll always be welcome in our home. Our real home, not the showcase Melissa wants to present to her social circle. Has anything changed with Melissa? I asked carefully. He sighed. Yes and no. She sees how much the girls love you, how they light up when we talk about visiting. That's made an impression. But she still struggles with the idea that her vision of our family life isn't the only valid one. Over the following months, a new pattern emerged. Thomas brought the girls to visit every 6 weeks or so, sometimes for a weekend, sometimes for longer during school breaks. In between, we had regular video calls where Emma and Lily would excitedly show me art projects or perform dance routines they'd learned. Melissa gradually thawed, not to warmth exactly, but to a civil accommodation. During one video call, she actually sat down for a few minutes and asked polite questions about my new community. Small steps, but significant ones given where we had started. Most surprisingly, Thomas began to distance himself from the Wellingtons' influence, declining invitations to their country club events and prioritizing time with his daughters over networking opportunities. This created tension with Melissa, he admitted during one visit, but he was standing firm. Dad's watch, he told me, touching it as he often did now. It reminds me every day of what's really important, not what you own or who you know, but how you treat the people who love you. As I sit here on my balcony today, watching the palm trees sway in the gentle breeze, I feel a profound sense of peace. The painful birthday dinner that seemed so devastating at the time was actually a gift. The gift of truth, of self-respect, and ultimately, of freedom. By walking away from a situation that diminished me, I created space for something much healthier to grow. My phone chimes with a text from Thomas. Confirmed flights for next month. Girls can't wait to see you. Melissa's coming too this time. Her idea. I smile, feeling cautiously optimistic about this new development. The healing is still in progress, the relationship's still evolving, but we're moving in the right direction. The most valuable lesson from this journey has been learning that love doesn't require self-erasure. That standing up for your dignity doesn't mean abandoning family connections, but rather creating the possibility for more authentic ones. Sometimes, the people who love you need to see you walk away in order to recognize what they might lose. Have you ever had to create distance from loved ones to find greater respect and appreciation? Or perhaps you've been on the other side, realizing too late the value of someone you've taken for granted. Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else finding their way through similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences and lessons learned. And if you know someone who might benefit from this message, share it with them. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone in our struggles is the first step toward finding our courage. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your dignity, to set healthy boundaries, and to teach others how to treat you with the respect you deserve. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply stand in your truth and let the consequences unfold